Good afternoon, everyone. I suppose all of you are taking up interviews this time. Most of you have got the interview calls. When are your interviews? This month? April. 2 months, okay. Good, great time. So congratulations to all of you. Now you are in the final huddle of the UPSC relay race. So how many of you are taking up the interview for the first time? Okay. Yeah, most of them are taking for the first time. UPSC names it as personality test, not an interview. So is there a difference between interview and personality test? Why UPSC does not call it interview? Why personality test? Have you ever thought of this? Never? Interview can be technical, isn't it? You go for technical interviews. But personality, what kind of personality UPSC is looking for? You are here, you are interacting with the people. It's not like technical, you are going for some IT sector job and you are going to give some technical interview. Interviews might be technical. But personality, here you are dealing with human beings in this job. So that is your personality. How apt is your personality as per the requirement of the jobs that you are filling up in your forms? That is the main thing. So what kind of personality UPSC is looking forward to? Do you have some kind of idea? No idea? कैसे लोग चाहिए? What kind of personality? Okay, leadership quality. Patience, okay. Rational, yes. Honest, yes. Empathy, yes, empathetic. Yeah, they are looking for someone who is very optimistic, very positive, honest, truthful, patient, because you are in public dealing. You have to be patient, yeah? And UPSC itself tells you what kind of personality it is looking forward to. Have you gone through the notification? What does it say? It says something, no? It says something about personality. Have you read it? Okay, I'll read it for you. It says, candidates are expected to have taken an intelligent interest not only in their special subjects of academic study, but also in the events which are happening around them, both within and outside their own state, country, and in modern currents of thoughts, and in new discoveries which should rouse the curiosity of a well-educated youth. So you cannot say, I am from a science background, so I don't have any interest in literature. Or I am from arts background, I don't have any interest in scientific researches. UPSC clearly says that should rouse the curiosity of a well-educated youth. Think of down the line 20 years, 25 years, when you will be the administrators, what kind of environment it would be. Too much interconnected world, scientific technology, use of scientific technology. So they are looking for people who will adapt to that kind of environment, yes? And it also mentions that they are looking for certain qualities like mental alertness, critical power of assimilation. So what is assimilation? Yes, yes. So they are looking for critical power of assimilation, how you are understanding the information. Number 3, they are looking for clear and logical exposition. What is exposition? Explanation. How clear and logical explanations you are giving. If you are being asked certain things, then you should give a rational and logical answer. Then balance of judgment. It should not be skewed. It should be a balanced judgment. Then variety and depth of interests. Ability for social cohesion and leadership. intellectual and moral integrity. Intellectual as well as moral integrity. That is what is UPSC is demanding. And they are looking forward to you with these qualities. So today we have Rangan Dutta sir. He is a retired bureaucrat. He was a very senior bureaucrat. He was even the advisor, scientific advisor to the government of India. And sir has vast experience. You can ask what all questions you want to ask from him. Clear your doubts. Don't go with any doubts before the panel there. Okay, so there are some questions which they keep on asking. Like, what is the use of optional for interviews? Should we study optional again, brush up optional or something? So what I can advise, rest sir will tell you, I would suggest like you should at least read the applicability part of your subject. At least you should be knowing. If you have studied geography and you are becoming a IPS officer, so is there any relationship between that geography that you have studied or history you have studied with your job as an IPS officer? So try to at least go through the applicability part, rest sir will tell. Then there is another question very frequently asked, if there is contradiction of view between the candidate and the board, then what to do? That is another question. So I would suggest, like, there might be situations where you have contradictory views with the panel. Say for example, something on reservation. You are applying for reservation, they are saying no, there should not be any reservation. So you are also right, they are also right. So, but they will try to, at times they try to convince you to change your opinion. Why they are doing so? They are just testing whether you can be easily influenced or not. So you might be right, they are also right. Of course, a coin has both the sides. So it's not necessary that you should move away from your stand unless and until it is very illogical, irrational. Okay? But then the big but comes here, and that big but is assertiveness vis-a-vis aggression. At times, to secure points, we become very aggressive. So aggressiveness is not required here. You have to be patient, you have to be calm, you have to honor, you have to respect the other point of view also. And humbly stick to your view. So don't contradict. Be a good listener. A good listener is a good leader. It's not only a good person who is a speaker. A good speaker as well as a good listener. Then another thing which is very commonly asked is, should we give long answers or short answers? Generally students say, छोटा सा आंसर दे देंगे तो उनको लगेगा इसको पता नहीं है. So it's not like you should know where to put a full stop. It's not that if you're saying very long answers, they also suggest that you are not aware of you don't have the actual awareness of the fact, you are not aware of your answer, first thing. Second thing, you are playing a defensive role. You're defending yourself, isn't it? So you should be knowing where to put a stop. It's not that keep on speaking, yeah? And then another very common question, if we don't know what to say, please don't fool around them. They know, they are like you are in 20s, they are in their 60s. They are like your grandparents. They understand everything. If you don't know it, humbly acknowledge it. They don't expect you to know everything under the sun, isn't it? They don't expect. But yes, if you don't know it, you acknowledge it. And acknowledging in front of others itself is a virtue, rather than bluffing, isn't it? So rest sir will tell you, and whatever doubts you have, please ask sir. He's the best guide for that. Sir, if you want to. Okay, sir.
Am I audible? Reasonably? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, may I, at the outset, offer my heartiest congratulations to you for your brilliant success in one of the toughest examinations that we have in this world. You are indeed a cut above the rest. I'm sure you are a cut above the rest because you have crossed 2 hurdles in a hurdle race. Only 1 hurdle remains. That's what you call personality test. Way back in 1966, I joined IAS and I was posted in Assam, Meghalaya, Kada, served in the state and in central government in various capacities. I am not a scientist, though after retirement, I was appointed as a scientific consultant in the office of the principal scientific advisor to the government of India for many years. I still have some association with the government. So it gives me enormous pleasure to interact with the young people at this age. So I, again, congratulate you on your success. And let's get down to the business. You see, I have been given a piece of paper where 5 subjects have been listed. I'm sure you have gone through it, have you? No. The task before us is to address these issues. What is expected from the interview board? What is expected from a candidate? How to form opinion on national and international social issues, international and social issues, and what areas and topics to cover in current affairs, and how to prepare over DAF, and formal dressing and etiquettes. Okay, now let me just tell you that what is personality test? Ruchika has explained to you. As I look at it, it is a purpose-driven formal conversation. Okay? Now, you, ladies and gentlemen, have earned the right to be interviewed by the Union Public Service Commission. It is nobody's favor. It is nobody's grace. By qualifying the examination, you have earned the right, and you are precisely exercising that right. Please remember, it is your strength. You have a right to be interviewed. You have earned that right, okay? This is very important because the confidence level of any individual in any sphere of life begins with the capacity to assert one's rights. And that capacity based on your understanding that you have a right, okay? So I am pressing this point because when you go to Dholpur house, bear in mind that this is your right. And since it is your haq or right, you expect justice also, okay? Right, justice from the board. Now, it is also a different type of purpose-driven activity for the board. I would call it public purpose, public interest-driven activity, because their job is in the nature of a public duty. All of them have been given a duty to select the best persons, the most competent for assignments to top cadres of the civil service, okay? Therefore, they are not doing any favor, but they are responsible to the public, accountable to the public, that this is a public duty. Therefore, for the members of the UPSC, I mean the board, it is a public purpose-driven work to be taken up with all sincerity, dedication, impartiality, fear or favor or bias, okay? So this must be known and realized by you that it is a purpose-driven conversation. It's not an informal chat, far from it. It is a purpose-driven conversation in which you have an object to prove that you are the suitable boy. You know the title of Bikram Chandra's novel, or the suitable girl. That is your object. And the board's object is to select the most competent, the most able among the candidates. Okay, having said this, now let me just tell you about the composition of the board. As of now, Dr. David Simlay is the chairman of the UPSC. He hails from Shillong, where I had worked for many, many years. If he happens to be in the board, possibly being a historian, he might ask you about Northeast areas, their problems, the Naga problem, the insurgency, related issues. So, first thing that you should do is to brush up your knowledge of Northeast region. If Mr. Simlay, David Simlay is there in the board, he might be tempted to test your knowledge of some of the problem areas of India. You often talk about Northeast areas being problematic and all that. So it is but natural that he might ask you. So that is one matter that you must take it into account. Who are the other members? Now you see, two of them will be serving bureaucrats, officials, on the verge of retirement. Then one or two should be retired bureaucrats. And there will be a group of what you call experts, academics, maybe an eminent doctor, maybe a psychologist, etc. Now, over the years, I have found, and I have no problem of sharing with you, that retired bureaucrats and those who are on the verge of retirement, they tend to develop, some aspects of what you call Stoic philosophy in Greeks, or a bit of cynicism. This happens when you grow old. What exactly is the manifestation of this kind of an approach to life? In one simple word, a simple expression is, more you change, more it remains the same. This is a kind of, philosophy that people tend to develop once they cross 56 or 57. That in life, nothing really changes. The more you change, the more it remains the same. This is the essence of cynicism, which was a cardinal Greek philosophy. So their attitudes to life are basically what you might call somewhat conservative. You see? So you must bear in mind this aspect. Now, the experts are a hybrid kind of a group. I cannot venture, but some of them could be little more interested in the candidates, because this is not a part of their ordinary kind of work. So they might ask you probing questions about your background, about your academic background, particularly your interest and all that. Now, what is the paper that they have before them? This is this paper, DAF. Now, I was telling Ruchika the other day that this is your self-appraisal as well as it is your horoscope. It is something your horoscope. Now, if I go through it carefully, and this will be circulated to members well ahead of the date of interview, what they would do, they would go through this and try to get a paint picture, a mental picture of the candidate who is going to appear. Now, what is the first thing that they would look at? They look at the photograph. Now, and the kind of shirt or whatever you are wearing. Now, if it is a kind of a t-shirt, something, or if it is a formal kind of a photograph, they will just give a look. So, if in the photograph it is vaguely written, "I love America," that could be a disaster. That may be the first question that will be asked. So I suggest you better check your DAF, and then everything that you have mentioned here will be scanned. In fact, the staff will produce a brief note on this note. What are the strong points of the candidates? It is the duty of the UPSC staff to produce a summary. Now, what they will normally do, let me tell you. One is your hobbies and extracurricular activities. Distinctions that you have earned. Now, there is a difference between hobby and extracurricular activity. Because extracurricular activities are limited to time, but hobbies are lifelong. So you have to make a subtle distinction between the two. So you should be sure of what exactly are your hobbies and what exactly are your extracurricular activities. If you have claimed that you have earned some distinction in football, cricket, or any other game, be sure that you know the rules of the game. A good football player who claimed that he was a good goalkeeper, who cannot answer the height of the goalpost, could be a little bit of a problem. So everything that you have mentioned here, please go through it again and make a mental note of a question that might be raised and what should be the kind of answer that you would give. Now take for instance, the other day I was sitting at one of these mock interview boards where a candidate has written, playing cricket but preferred to follow cricket. Now I asked him, what is the difference between the two? Do you follow on TV or do you have any other way of following it up? Then he admitted that largely he watches TV. Then the next question was, what was the score? Obviously, he could not answer. The point is that when you watch TV, your mind is elsewhere. It is not always focused on the screen. So if you claim that you are a kind of a cricket fan and have been watching cricket, following cricket seriously, you ought to know the performance of Indian team in recent times. So a bit of what you call particularly intensive knowledge, a little bit more interest, is required, rather than a casual kind of interest in the subject. So this would require a thorough study. Okay. Now, apart from this, I would say that your education. Now, suppose you have gone to Dayanand Anglo-Vedic school or college, and if you are asked, who was Swami Dayanand, you ought to know. In the sense, not that he was a great religious reformer or something. They would ask you, where was he born? When? When did he die? What are the areas of India where his influence was felt and still now is being felt? So, just an example, a person had gone to Lady Shriram College. Who was Lady Shriram? If the answer is Lord Shriram's wife, it is not going to help. Who was Lady Shriram? You've spent so many years in that college. So this kind of curiosity is essential. In the same manner, I would say, when you go to Dholpur house, the question may be asked, where is Dholpur? Where is Dholpur? And how is it that in India, in Delhi, you have all these houses? Jaipur house, Hyderabad house, this, that, or the other. What are the reasons for these princely states being allotted lands in Delhi by the British government? There is no Bengal house, or Madras house, or Bombay house. Why do you have Patiala house? The answer is that these princely states had treaty relationships with the British, what is known as Lord Wellesley's subsidiary alliance. Because they had treaty relationships, they had some kind of suzerainty. They enjoyed some rights under the paramountcy of the British crown. And therefore, they were given lands here. And who got the largest plot? Hyderabad, because it was the largest princely state. So this alertness of mind and positive curiosity and some kind of a creative curiosity are the qualities which would be very important, right? Now, Okay. Now come this substantive issue. Which, can you get me a glass of water later? See, you are being considered for appointments to the civil service, right? Yeah, Raghuji. Now, what is civil service? Is the first question that might be asked. And over the years that I've been associated with this kind of program, I found that if you ask this question to a candidate, one gets a kind of a dreamy reply. I wish to give back to the society the debt that I have, incurred over the years. I want to do social service. I want to help the poor, downtrodden, to be a part of the people, like that. The answer to that would be, please join an NGO, in that case, or Ramakrishna Mission, or Bharat Sevasram Sangh. What is civil service? Can any of you answer? Just.
To implement the policies of
that branch of government which is concerned with providing essential services to the citizens.
That branch of?
The government which is concerned with providing essential services which a government is responsible for to its citizens.
Any other? You agree? This is a consensus?
Non-military government services.
Okay, good. That's a good answer. Any other?
Sir, it is part of the executive for implementation of government schemes and projects.
Okay. Now you see, if you check Oxford Dictionary, civil service means all posts of the government, the cost of which is borne on the civil side of the budget. In every budget, you have a civil side, you have a military side, you have the judicial side. So a peon is also a civil servant, as much as the cabinet secretary. So this is the legal definition of civil service. Second point is that it is primarily, quote and unquote, the operative part of the government. In other words, it is law enforcement agency. Civil service is primarily a law enforcement agency. Fine? World Bank definition of governance is important in this regard. Please remember this very well. These days, the word governance is being used, rather indiscriminately. Every day you see something like governance failure. But what is governance? Could you possibly define governance? The World Bank has made an interesting definition of governance, which I would like to tell you. I quote, governance is the exercise of economic, political, and administrative authority to manage a country's affairs at all levels, unquote. This is the definition of governance. Okay? Now, I have defined civil service as essentially a law enforcement agency. Now, all tax laws, like income tax, are enforced by the income tax department. So these are all enforcement functions. So, if you are asked, why do you wish to join civil service? Which is usually asked, a sensible course would be not that I would like to dedicate my life to the cause of the common people, etc., downtrodden, etc., etc. No, said, sir, I would like to be a part of the system of governance of this country. That would be a very sensible reply. Okay? Now, the civil service of any country is different from any other profession like medical engineering, in the sense that whether you are in Burma, Myanmar, or Pakistan, if you are a doctor, your work is more or less the same. Whereas there is, quote and unquote, there is a symbiotic relationship between the character of the civil service and the form of government. In Pakistan, for instance, if you see their constitution, it begins with the sentence that the sovereignty, whereas sovereignty rests with Allah, not with people. And it makes a world of difference. And there is no concept of rule of law in Pakistan. Why? Because you have the Sharia courts and you have the other courts. Appeal against orders of the Sharia court shall not lie with the Supreme Court. No, Supreme Court has no jurisdiction over the proceedings of the Sharia court. In Myanmar, almost half the posts in Home, External Affairs and Defense is reserved for the military personnel. And under 2008 Constitution of Myanmar, which is still in force, about 25% of the members of the parliament are appointed by the army chief. So the ball game is very different. This point is extremely important for you to remember. But we have in India a form of government which is primarily on the British model. How many of you have heard of this expression, common law? Any of you? Common law? You know? No. You see, I suggest you pick up a small book written by Fali S. Nariman, the distinguished jurist, India's Legal System, Can It Survive? That's the title of this book. Now, India, this is the perception as a practitioner, an official who has served in government for so many years. And this is the first thing that I have been told when I joined Missouri Academy in 1966. India is a common law country, quote unquote, meaning it is a country where British principles of laws, rules, jurisprudence, precedents, and conventions are followed in letter and spirit. Please remember this. India is a common law country. Okay? Now, in a common law country, there are certain features. This you must understand to be able to participate in a discussion. One is the healthy British tradition of not trusting anybody with too much of power. You see? Power corrupts, Lord Acton said, and corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, the famous statement of Lord Acton. Therefore, what the British have developed, which we have followed, is that no wing of the government, executive, legislative, and judiciary, had been given what you call overriding dominant power, right? Now, how it works? Laws are made by the parliament, but under judicial review, the Supreme Court and the courts have the power to interpret. And in the process, what they do is to make judge-made laws, quote and unquote. This is one of the most interesting features of India. Just to tell you, this collegium system of appointment of judges, about which you must be reading, there is no article in the Constitution, or there is no law. This collegium system was introduced under an order of the Supreme Court, and it is law. You may not remember, you're too young, perhaps, Shah Banu case, where the Supreme Court had issued an order. The order has the force of law, but the government had to amend the law, bring a law to undo what Supreme Court wanted to enforce. So judge-made laws is a major feature of our parliamentary form of government. Second is the role of the civil service. In the sense, this is why I would be pretty conservative. A civil servant is essentially a person who exercises powers conferred on him or her under a statute. Okay. Under Arms Act, I've issued licenses to many people, but the power is conferred on me under Section 6 of the Arms Act, and I am only competent to exercise the power. And my work can be questioned only by a legally appointed superior competent authority. In all land matters, whatever orders have passed, even when I was SDO, the appeal was always with the Board of Revenue. And the appeal against Board of Revenue's orders shall lie with the High Court. So one must remember, a civil servant is essentially called upon in a system that we have to exercise power in his or her own rights. You cannot exercise powers under the influence of somebody else. If you do so, it will be a strict kind of an act of betraying the trust reposed on you. I come to this interesting point later. You see, since civil servants have powers over other citizens, this is the major difference between service in the corporate sector. Many of you might be working in various companies. Remember, regardless of the salaries that one might get, a company is only administered under the Companies Act. And a company official is accountable to the shareholders. He has no power over other citizens of the country. Whereas a civil servant exercises powers over other citizens of the country in all matters. Any doubt on this? As a magistrate, I can impose 144, restricting movement of people, and I will say in a vainglorious manner, whereas I so and so, I am satisfied that this situation has arisen which requires imposition of 144. Therefore, I do this. I can restrict the rights of the citizens in exercise of powers conferred on me under laws. And that applies to everybody, whatever may be the department. Now, come to the third point, is that why is this exam-based recruitment? What is the philosophy of exam-based recruitment? You might know that it started in China. Knew about it? Thousands of years ago. It is a Chinese civilization's gift to the world. And they're based on a Chinese proverbs. Some Chinese proverbs. One proverb is, fools cannot be trusted with high responsibility, unquote. Fools cannot be trusted with high responsibility. That involves affecting the rights of others. Other proverb is, only the competent can be a mandarin. A mandarin must be a very competent person. Therefore, the system of competitive examination was introduced in China many, many years ago. Now, there are two aspects of this which I would like to highlight. One is that this gives legitimacy to the civil service. Please remember this point. Earlier, appointments to high positions of the government were usually hereditary or patronage. Jaigir, kisi ko de diya. The system of administration that we have in India today owes its origin to the year 1765, when a worthless emperor of India, Naam ke waste, by the name Shah Alam, granted Diwali to a trading company, East India Company. This was the first instance, in my opinion, of privatization of government anywhere in the world. I have not seen it. First example. Now, following this privatization, the East India Company found that the administration was run by the officials appointed by the emperor earlier. So they did not interfere in this system. But let me tell you, there were 26 districts in Suba, Bengal, the Mughal Suba, Bengal, which included Bengal, Bihar, and parts of Orissa. Out of them, William Hunter, in his famous book, The Indian Musulmans, recorded, out of these 26 district officers, about 22 were Mohammedans of Persian origin, because Persian was the official language. And all of them held hereditary appointments. Okay? Now, this system was scrapped by Warren Hastings when he drove them out and appointed the East India Company officials as collectors. They were the covenanted servants of the East India Company, and they became the officials. This is how in 1773, Warren Hastings created the institution of the district magistrates and collector in the year 1773. Now, therefore, in England in 1853, it was decided that recruitment to Indian civil service, higher position, should be on the basis of merit. So there are two issues. One is it provides legitimacy. Second, more importantly, there is an element of public trust. Therefore, if a civil servant appointed to this position indulges in corruption, it is a case of breach of trust, a breach of public trust. And the definition of public servants in Karunanidhi's case is that ministers are also public servants. So these 2 points you must remember: legitimacy, and second, the public trust. There is a third issue. I mentioned that a peon is also a civil servant. What exactly are you really trying to become? Unfortunately, in the discourse, in the kind of books that you have here and there, you don't get a clear idea of what exactly is your role in the system. Let me just quote you the cadres for which you are competing for entry are what you might call higher civil servants. Higher civil service. There's a definition of higher civil service given by the Organization of European Cooperation and Development, OECD. There's a definition of OECD which is very important here. Why I'm saying so? Because you must understand the role that you're going to play. OECD describes senior civil service as, I quote, a structured and recognized system of personnel for the higher non-political positions in government. It is a career civil service providing people to be competitively appointed to functions that cover policy advice, operational delivery, or corporate service delivery. The service is centrally managed through appropriate institutions and procedures in order to provide stability and professionalism of the core group of senior civil servants, but also allowing the necessary flexibility to match changes in the composition of government by using appropriate due processes. Now, this is the European definition of civil service in European democracies. Now, see here, what exactly is the import of this definition? Let me quote from Wilburn. Democracy may be interpreted not as a government by the people, but as with the consent of the people, with professionals making most of the decisions. Which means that is of the people, for the people, by the people, that you all know about, needs a little bit of modification. And the modification is, yes, it is of the people, but but governance is not by the people. It is basically by the appointed civil servants. Now, there's a man called Paul Dachant, a Frenchman, who was so exasperated. He made a statement, and I quote, "France is not a democracy, it is a bureaucracy," unquote. In other words, the system of modern democracy that we have in Europe, which we have opted for, puts a huge trust on the competence of the civil service to deliver service without fear or favor, without bias or prejudice. So therefore, in this segment, what I'm trying to say is that the cadres for which you are applying for, belong to the senior civil service. With one rider, the 4 Group B posts don't belong to the elite cadre, right? Because if you are recruited as a Group B officer, you have to wait for another 15 years or so to get promoted to Group A. So the elite civil service, as it is called in Singapore, is the Group A, if you follow that logic. Now, so if this is the position, then when you give your service preferences, one would expect you to be logical. And in government, there is a particular expression, quote and unquote, a man of ordinary prudence. In other words, whatever you do, we would expect that a man of ordinary prudence would not have done this, or would do this, or would do that. You get this interesting British expression, a man of ordinary prudence. Now, if you look at the DAF, your DAF and service preferences, I find that some candidates have put higher preference to Group B services, to Group A cadres. Now, if this will be certainly seen, and the office will put up a note to the chairman that what are the special qualities of this candidate. He had put higher preference to Delhi civil service, and a class 1 service, Group A service, he has put a lower preference. The question is such a person of ordinary prudence? Because he was taking the examination, taking the trouble of competing, but you would like to be selected for a lower cadre when you could have opted for, when you could easily opt for a higher cadre. So what I would suggest that if any of you had given this kind of an indication, for some cultural reasons, maybe that one would prefer Delhi civil service to be close to your home, that could be one reason or the other. Or somebody had given Pondicherry civil service because close to Tamil Nadu or whatever. Be ready with a sensible reply to prove that you are still a person of ordinary prudence. Because this is an extremely important matter, right? Second, any of you had opted for foreign service as first preference? No. Second preference? Good. Now, the foreign service is a different kettle of fish. Now, because the interactions are with the wide world. Now, let me just share with you what are the qualities which are needed to be selected for the foreign service. There's an European definition of a diplomat. Let me just quote this. I quote, a diplomat is a person who can tell you to go to hell in such a way and in such a manner that you may even look forward to the trip, unquote. What it means, that a diplomat is a person who should be able to talk and talk well. So the board would like to see the potential, of a diplomat in terms of articulation. A most unpleasant thing he may deliver in a most pleasant manner. And the quotation that I have given you is an example of that. That a diplomat's first quality is that he should be able to talk and talk well. You see? So these are what you call the core values and main functions of the civil service. So if you are asked this question, You are an engineer. How many of you are from engineering stream? Most of you, I suppose. Good number of them. Why do you wish to switch over to civil service? Now, if you answer that I would like to dedicate my life to the cause of the poor and the downtrodden, it's not going to be convincing, especially if you had served in Infosys earlier, or in Hindustan Lever, or in some other high-flying corporations. The answer which is normally probably given in such cases, which is appreciated, is that, after all, I have been trained in a discipline which teaches me problem-solving techniques, capacity to reason, and reach a reasoned judgment. So, science essentially teaches me how to appraise evidence and facts, draw conclusions, and take actions accordingly. So I do not think that my science or engineering education is in any way an obstacle to my, or a handicap to my career in the civil service. So I have concluded the first two parts of this task. Now, the board primarily will check, in the background of what I mentioned, some of the qualities which are essential. One is alertness about environment. Okay? Before I go further, let me tell you, this is what you call in army parlance GSQ, General Staff Qualification Requirement, GSQR. GSQR, General Staff Qualification Requirements. And you'd agree that selecting personnel is always very difficult. Now let me just share with you, Winston Churchill had a lot of sense of humor apart from his literary skills. He categorized British officials into 3 categories. It has nothing to do with this briefing, but it might be of some use. The first category, intelligent and hardworking. These are the people who make excellent staff officers. They prepare staff papers, strategies, etc. Second category is unintelligent but hardworking. They are the people who make excellent subordinates. And the third category is intelligent but lazy. Lazy and intelligent. Now, this category is the strategists, the leaders, the visionaries, people who dream and make policies, etc. So, in bureaucracy, in our circles, we always assess people in terms of these 3 qualities. Now, when I'm talking about GSQR, is that the requirements of the job vary widely from one service to another. But there are certain common factors. I'll go into these common factors, but before that, let me ask you, how do you feel about this much? Is there anything that you would like to know about the interview? Well, first thing, you should dress well, properly. Not well, but properly. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Now, if you're wearing for men, if you're wearing a pant and shirt, it is better that you wear a white shirt and a dark or gray trousers. Socks should be matching. White socks would be a disaster. And a pair of black shoes. If you're wearing a dark pair of trousers, you should wear dark pair of shoes. And what kind of shoes would you wear? No sports shoes. Sports shoes are out. You should wear a formal pair of shoes. Now, In our times, even now, there are two types basically followed in British bureaucracy and Indian bureaucracy. One is Oxford, which I am wearing now. The other is called brogue. Brogue is what you see some spotted. Now, in India, in the civil service, the Bengal and eastern cadres would prefer Oxford, and in Punjab and Northwest, it was brogue. It was a part of the civil service culture that we inherited from the British. But it should not be casual. It should not be a chappal type. It should be closed shoes. If you have derby, this derby can be all right, but better a shoe with lace on. That kind of shoes we prefer. Fine. For ladies, you should dress, if you wish to wear a sari, it is fine, but it should be a reasonably plain color, cream or something. You should give an impression. You have to create an impression that you are a person of ordinary prudence and capable of enforcing law. Please remember, primary duty of a civil servant is, because you are the creature of the law, your job is to enforce law, and over and above, in some services, you have development functions. Now, there are two types of functions in the government, regulatory and development. Now, most central services, Group A, deal with the regulatory part, whether it is accounts, whether it is income tax, whether it is customs. These are regulatory wings of the government. Okay. There is no development function. The development function for an income tax officer is to raise more taxes, which means finding out those who have not been filing tax return, bring them within the tax net. Okay. Now, if you are in IAS, then you have the other function, that you are responsible for spending money from out of the agriculture department's budget or whatever. So you have a development functions. But all these require compliance with rules and regulations. Therefore, the demeanor should be one of a person who is confident, sure of himself or herself, and who is capable, who is not frivolous. Your dress might indicate that you are not the serious minded. So therefore, you are not frivolous. That's what frivolity is not a good quality. And you must present yourself when you enter into the room. You should wish, and then once you're asked to take your seat, you should take your seat. Okay, now I'll come to these aspects later, but if you have any doubt about the role of the civil service, because I've given my views rather frankly, based on whatever I have seen in my life. If you have any question, I would be happy to respond about what we have discussed so far about the proceedings. Yeah.
So what if somebody decides to wear suit during the hot month of May? Will it be awkward?
Not at all, because the room will be air conditioned. You see, the board room will be air conditioned. It is very comfortable. A light suit, the kind of suit that I wear, for instance, this is a gray suit. It is called business suit. Gray suit with white shirt, and tie should be spotted or striped. Does any of you see channel New Asia, a TV channel? asset to learn law. To understand law, you must have curiosity, because the procedure is important, right? Second quality is capacity to think. Whether you have a capacity to think independently and draw a conclusion and make a judgment or form an opinion. This is most important quality. Whether you have the capacity to think. Everybody has been thinking always, sometimes thinking aloud. But think means here is related to a problem. Suppose I'm asking you about this Jallikattu business. I would like to know what is your opinion on that. So you should give a reasoned opinion on the subject. Okay? Next quality is articulation. Written as well as spoken. Now here you will be primarily talking to them. Now, the first thing that you should note here is that articulation begins with silence, in the sense that you must listen to what the matter is raised. Now first, let me tell you, it is not a cross-examination. You are not in the witness box to be cross-examined by a lawyer. No, not at all. It is not a quiz competition also. Your knowledge, your academic merits have been already tested. We are not going to do that. But what is going to be tested is, see, whether you have a bent of mind capable of giving thought to a matter quickly and come out with a reasoned response. Now this begins with first, when you see the whole idea, let me just explain a bit. The purpose of raising an issue is not to test your information base, but to draw you into a discussion. And you should facilitate the discussion. Okay. So therefore, your reply is essentially to facilitate a discussion, to set the ball rolling. The chairman will set the ball rolling, and you are to respond. What they say in English, you are to play ball. Okay? So therefore, to do that, the first thing that please remember is that you give a pause. When a matter is raised, just give 1 second, 2 seconds. Then you give your response. And then you stop on your own. Don't move like Rajdhani Express. No, don't go on talking. No. Limit your response to the matter raised. And you stop on your own. Don't hang on to it and go to, because there is a danger that you might mention something else, something unconnected with the matter raised by the member of the board, of which you might not be very sure. So limit your response to the matter raised and stop on your own. This is a part of articulation. Agreed? Any doubt on this? So most important thing is listening. Sometimes candidate gets a bit nervous after entering. What the board will do is that they will make you feel at ease. Not feel at home, but feel at ease. They will tell you, ask you about your school, your home state, about something that you know, to help you to settle down. Please remember, to help you to settle down. After you settle down, then they might ask you, what do you think of demonetization? What is your feeling? So by the time you settle down, you have a bent of mind prepared to respond to a more difficult issue. Okay? Then eye contact is very important, because you have to look at the entire board. There are 4 or 5 people. It is not person-to-person conversation. So when you make the response, please look at the entire table. Okay? Because others are also observing you. Fine? So articulation is essentially the outcome of such responses. And you'll see for yourself that you'll be able to speak more confidently if you stop on your own. Once you make your point, right? Next is your intellectual and moral integrity. Now, this is very important. Now, what creates problems? The habit of saying, "Sir, may I guess?" No. Such responses are not there. Many candidates say, "Sir, I don't know, I'm not sure, but may I guess?" Why do you say, if you are not sure, it is as good as saying, "I don't know." There's no difference. When you say, "I'm not sure," it is as good as saying, "I don't know." So why say, "I'm not sure"? Rather you say, "I don't know." That will be appreciated. Because you have the moral strength to say, "I don't know." You're honest enough to admit that I don't know the matter. It's not that you should know everything in the world. Even God doesn't know. God has been kept out of picture for many, many years for many, many matters. If you read Holy Bible, there are many instances where God did not know what happened. So he had to be informed later. So therefore, please remember, if you don't know any matter, don't manufacture a reply. Don't produce a reply which is not factually correct. If you're sure, you say, "I know." If you don't, please say that, "I don't." Right? Then, when you make a submission, you make a point, say on Jalikuti or Demonetization or Kashmir or the Ramjas College fracas or whatever. When you make a point, you should be polite but firm. And you should be able to defend your opinion. That is very important. They might ask you, why? Why do you feel so strongly about it? Then you have to defend that opinion. So, but it should be done in a polite and firm manner. Why are these things important? Because together, these qualities add up to what you call leadership qualities. Leadership quality is nothing but plus, 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 plus. It is a function of all these qualities, right? Now, they will refer to your DAF. So I'm telling you again that DAF should be read by you very carefully, and what you should do, you make some points. What are the likely questions that could be raised? Right? Now suppose you're already in customs or some service, you want to join IAS. There are many candidates I find like that. So they will be asked, why do you wish to join IAS? Then the next question will be, what is IAS? When was IAS created? What was the cadre before IAS? What was it before? Indian Civil Service. When was Indian Civil Service created? Yeah, you are partly correct, but 1862 ICS Act formally gave this name to the service. Between 1853 and 1862, this was still, a covenanted service. And what was the difference between ICS and us? The ICS officers never retired. They resigned because they signed a covenant, an agreement with the Secretary of State for India in London. So it is a kind of an agreement. This is called covenant. So Mrs. Gandhi she had a sense of history in many ways. She made ICS a part of the IAS under 1973 Act. And the ICS officers who were serving at that time, they felt extremely humiliated. And because the ICS was the heaven-born service. not for the mortals, but for the heaven born. So, some of these facts, like say Indian Police Service. What was the previous service? The Imperial Indian Police. When was it set up? So the few facts, and what is the nature of the work that you like to? Why is it that you prefer this particular service? Why? So you have got to familiarize yourself. Now for the IAS, I can only say this much. If a question is asked, you might answer this way, that IAS holds an unrivaled strategic position in the governance of the country, both at the center and in the states. And I would like to be a part, therefore, of the service, which holds such an unique position. Right? Because, this you need not mention, there are cadre posts in the central government as well in the states, which can be manned only by the IAS officers. So, what some other people call it stranglehold, but whatever it is, this is a fact of life. So, the unrivaled strategic position of the IAS in the government is what attracts me to join. I'll get a chance to work in the field, in regulatory as well as development spheres, and also take part in policy making efforts of the government. I'll be a part of the policy making system, apart from being responsible for implementation. Right? So, the other issue that might come is your previous work experience. If somebody had already worked in private sector, Infosys, big companies, or wherever, they might ask you, how is that experience going to be of some use to you? How is it relevant? How did you enjoy that part of your work? Why did you leave? Why would you like to leave and switch over? So these questions are extremely important. Fine? Right. So, this completes the portion, the segment, which has been given to me by Vision IAS. First two. Now, how to form opinion on national and international and social issues. It's a very difficult subject. I can only discuss in an interactive manner. Do you have any question on, say, foreign affairs? Anything you'd like to say? Well, let me then tell you that, you see, it is a complex intellectual exercise. Let us start with foreign affairs. Okay? The first unpleasant reality of conduct of foreign relations is what is not stated in newspapers or media. Raymond Aron, the great French strategic thinker, said, and I quote, "International relations are conducted always in the background of war. There is war." This is unquote. International relations are always conducted in the shadow of war, in the backdrop of war. It may not be discernible. The diplomats may shake hands, drink claret, or whatever, raise toasts, but there is always a looming kind of fear of war. Isko to theek kar diya. That's why you have joint military exercises. Why? That's why we have patrolling in the sea. Second, human nature has not changed. This is what Raymond Aron said, that despite scientific technological changes, the human nature has not changed. And therefore, every country, every sovereign country reserves the right to wage war, to pursue its national interest and strategic objectives. This right is unfettered. Second, this is very important, every country has the right to decide what constitutes that country's national interest. Okay? Now, while working out these ideas of national interest, a country may be influenced by United Nations conventions, various, international agreements, but legally, every sovereign nation state reserves the right to decide what is in its national interest. In Sri Lanka, I had this experience when Sri Lankans told us very clearly that it is not in our national interest to grant the demand for Ilam. The Tamil demand for a separate country is not on. It is against the interest of Sinhala people. We will not agree with it, come what may. So therefore, in the ultimate analysis, a country reserves the right. Now this is the cause of international tensions. So if you are to answer any question, you might as well think or take into account what has been our national interest as articulated by the government at a particular point of time. The other two realities of international relations are best stated by Dr. Henry Kissinger. I quote, this is about diplomacy. Kissinger writes, I quote, "Successful diplomacy is more about managing problems than solving them outright." Unquote. Successful diplomacy is more about managing problems than solving them outright. Second point he made is equally incisive. I quote, "The task of a statesman is to construct a balance of fear among great powers. As part of the maintenance of an orderly international system that, while not necessarily just or fair, was accepted by the principal players as legitimate." Unquote. Now, these are loaded statements. You understand? Now, the foreign relations are primarily founded on these three principles I mentioned. It is my country's interest, first, foremost. Therefore, Donald Trump, if he says America first, we should not object to it. It is perfectly natural for Donald Trump to say America first. So it is perfectly in keeping with the basic philosophy of conduct of international relations today. Okay? Now, if there is a question about Kashmir, say, it is ultimately India's security interest that should decide your stand. And the subject is so vast, it might take a lot more time. But I would only suggest that you look at South China Sea dispute carefully. Why was it that there was no dispute 30 years back? This is a question I asked myself. The reason being that it was not at that time a sea lane. Today, 30% of the global commerce is passing through South China Sea. It is now as important, more important than Suez Canal. You remember the war that took place in 1956 over Suez Canal. Now, South China Sea, therefore, has assumed enormous importance because he who controls South China Sea controls the sea lane, like the Strait of Malacca. So the Chinese would not like to sit tight. They would like to control it. And there are various advantages of controlling a sea lane, okay? Like this, the disputes that are taking place in the world would require some appreciation. Some of the basics I might talk about. Take Middle East. Why are the Shias and Sunnis killing each other for centuries? A question may be asked. Who are the Sunnis? What's the difference between Shia and Sunnis? Could any of you tell me? What's the difference between Shias and Sunnis? Tell me.
The difference of the successor of, sir, it was a tussle regarding who is the actual successor, whether the son-in-law or the one who is chosen by the,
By
the prophet.
Tell me, what does the word Sunni mean?
Sunnah, the one who sticks to Sunnah.
Followers.
Please. Sunnah. What Sunni is derived from the Arabic word sunnah. But it's not. The real Arabic word is sanna, which means tradition. And the word Shia is also an Arabic word, which means protests. So you are absolutely right. When Prophet died, the tradition demanded that his successor should be elected, and with the consent of the tribal chiefs. But Shias are those who felt that it should be in the family. Now, these Shias and Sunnis, now the next question I could ask you, what is the basis of Arab-Israeli conflict? What is the difference between Judaism and Christianity? Can anybody tell me? What's the difference between Judaism and Christianity?
Sir, all three are Abrahamic religions: Islam, Christianity and Judaism. Judaism was before Christianity and Jesus was crucified, and Jews are considered responsible for that.
Yes, but what's the difference? I'm talking about the theology part.
Different prophets. Jews follow Moses and Christians follow Jesus.
Have you visited any church?
Yes.
Any Christian church?
Yes.
Have you observed a
Cross.
crucifix? What is written there? Did any of you note? Yes. INRI. Do you know what does it mean? It is in Latin. It means Jesus of Nazareth, King of Jews, Rex Jesus. When I went to Israel, went to Bethlehem, my Jewish colleague told me from Israeli government, Jesus was born a Jew, he died a Jew. Please remember this. So, to cut this long story short, the Holy Bible, the Old Testament, is the book that all the three faiths follow. They have common ancestry, Abraham. It's called Abrahamic religion. Okay? Moses, when he rescued his people, he said that I will come. I will come again. This is the avatar bath, it to say. I will come. So, when Jesus was born, he was the King of Jews, and he claimed that he is the person, he is the Son of God, who came to change the paths of the Jews who are not following the scriptures of Moses. But the Jews said, no, you are not the prophet. You are an impostor. You are an impostor. Now, So the Jesus was deeply frustrated. So in the Bible, in the New Testament, he one day out of sense of frustration, he told Paul and Thomas, his two disciples, that if the Jews, the chosen people of God, do not listen to me, please carry my message among the Gentiles. Gentiles are non-Jews. So St. Paul and St. Peter, St. Thomas, they went across the world and spread the gospel. So those who accept Jesus, Christ as the prophet, he is the last prophet. Now after 500 years, when Muhammad was born, and he claimed that he is the prophet, obviously the Jews and the Christians did not agree. So this is the root of the problem. So if you are a candidate for the IAS, one would expect you to know these nuances of Shia, Sunni, Maronite Christians and Druze, the problems in Syria, the Alawite sect, all this might be important. But broadly, one must know why Shias and Sunnis differ each other. It is another matter that why they're killing each other is not clear to many people. But you must know the subtle differences, okay? So in the same manner, one must look at, in this way, the problems of, say, integration in different parts of the world. Take the refugee crisis in Europe. Why? What is the prospect? Why is it that there is de-globalization? See, what are the implications of de-globalization for India? Donald Trump has taken a step, H-1B visa. Now you cannot have a short route to get this visa. So we must follow the recent policies of governments like UK, the impact of Brexit, and the likely crisis in Europe. If right-wing governments come to power, what is the future of European Union, etc.? In the same manner, if you look at Asia, ASEAN is a vibrant organization. What is India's role in that? And what are the treaties that we have signed with ASEAN for free trade? We have signed a number of free trade agreements with ASEAN countries. Look East policy, the Act East policy. These are matters to be studied because trade and development are integrally related to each other. Trade and development are closely linked. And WTO must be your focus. So if you look into these problem areas and the core areas of our interest, like for instance the Chabahar port in Iran that we are trying to construct. In the same manner, you see TAPI. What are the implications of one belt, one road, CPAC for us, etc. So as far as India's border disputes with China are concerned, I would go by Dr. Kissinger's formula, that diplomacy is really not about solving a problem. You have to manage the problem. And we have been managing it reasonably well. The same, I think same will apply to Kashmir. You cannot solve the problem, but you can manage the problem. So on these principles, you can handle international relations. So before I switch over to the domestic issues, is there anything you would like to know on this international relations? So your opinion should be India-centric. Please remember, it should be India-centric response. And one more thing, you need not take any side. It is not that you are supporting Bashar al-Assad, or no. It is not right. As far as we are concerned, we are not bothered. But we would like to see our interest in that, our security interests, our commercial interests. So it is not that you have to take a side. For instance, on Arab-Israeli problem, many Indians feel strongly in favor of Israel, but it's neither here nor there. At any case, Israel doesn't care for your support. They just don't bother. They don't need. They're strong enough to look after themselves. You see? So, yeah.
Sir, recently there was a cancellation of the SARC meeting in view of India's security interests. But if we see from the commercial view, then SARC stands out to be a good point for India. So cancellation on one side and then not integrating it with the commercial interests, does it make a valid point?
Please check your facts. SARC has not been successful at all as a mechanism for promoting commerce. Therefore, India had moved on to BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, BIMSTEC. And we are now talking about BCIM, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar. And our Act East policies focus is on Southeast Asia, basically. Because the ASEAN is a huge market, and we have a substantial presence of Indians in Southeast, in ASEAN countries, in Malaysia, in Singapore, for instance. So SARC is not moving forward because of the Pakistani factor, and the India factor also, because we just can't get along. So SARC is a non-starter. But therefore, we have switched over to other what you call sub-regional arrangements. Okay. Any other question? United Nations Security Council membership. Yes, we should be there, but it has to be approved by the United Nations. Okay? And Trump's one China policy. More particularly, some facts you must know. What is GDP of China?
13 trillion.
How much?
Almost 6 times ours, 13 trillion.
Okay, right. What is per capita GDP? See, if you check World Development Report of the World Bank, there's an annexure where all these facts are given. Okay. Now, is India going to be a developed nation as President Kalam dreamed? 2020? 2020 is nearby, no pass. What is the definition of a developed country?
Where everyone has basic amenities.
No. A developed country, as per the World Bank, is one which has a per capita, how much? You know? You don't know. $20,000. What is our per capita GDP? Any of you?
93,000 rupees.
In terms of dollar, which is the international currency?
1.2.
Is 1,393, according to latest estimates. Now, we are placed in the World Bank report in lower middle income category. So therefore, if anybody asks you whether India is becoming a superpower, you give a reasoned reply. Sorry, we have a long way to go. You see, in absolute terms, the size of our market may be large. But look at the other numbers. Chinese exports are more than the GDP of India. Chinese exports are about $2 trillion. The other aspect is, what is the proportion of high-tech exports in your exports as compared to China, Malaysia, and other countries of ASEAN? If you look into these figures, then you can get a mental picture. What I'm trying to suggest is that please memorize the GDP per capita figures of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, Malaysia, Indonesia, and some ASEAN countries. China particularly, you should study. Nowadays, with internet and all that, you have lots of facilities. Please form an opinion of the strength of China. Okay? Any other question on this subject?
So, on the Kashmir issue, I want to know what will be our opinion
On?
The use of pellet gun.
Use of pellet guns or Armed Forces Special Powers Act.
Or Personal Safety Act. So there is also a law, Personal Safety Act, which one can be held in jail for 2 years without trial.
In Kashmir, is it? You see, the response could be like this, that the continuing unrest in Kashmir and organized violence in the form of some kind of intifada. Stone pelting is basically what was started in the west bank of River Jordan area. Now, this has to be responded by the administration. So, therefore, pellet guns is an option. Looking from the human angle, it is better than 303 bullets and all that. This is one. Second, ultimately, the society has to respond to the problem. The idea of azadi may be desirable, but somehow it is not achievable. This must be brought home. Therefore, in the situation prevailing in Kashmir, well, there is a government, mind you. There is a government which is accountable to the legislature of Kashmir, manned by the people of Kashmir. The government has a lot of responsibility in this regard. Armed Forces Special Powers Act, it's a big issue. The nature of the insurgency in Manipur, Nagaland, etc., which Mizoram, where I had served during insurgency, the nature of the insurgency demanded that kind of a law. And as of now, there has been no decision to scrap it. Only thing is that there are certain provisions in the Act which could be enforced to prevent excesses being committed by the armed forces personnel. They have been given extraordinary powers, and powers are liable to be misused. So therefore, there must be some kind of a local governmental control for ensuring that the excesses are not committed. That is all that you could hope for at the moment. Right? Now, the next issue is how do you deal with internal situation and current affairs internally. What should be, according to you, the focus? See, I would suggest that some of the recent problems in the last 6-7 months, you please list. Jallikattu is one. No? Then some of the initiatives of the government, like crop insurance, pension scheme, rural connectivity, okay, then Digital India program, then towards a cashless economy. What are the various initiatives taken by the government? That must be. Can you think of any burning problem which has not been resolved adequately? S-Oil Canal, yes. That is one issue. India's water treaty. Now that we have gone for a routine kind of meeting, and Violence. Yeah. In US, student politics. You see, if this issue, most unlikely, though, it is not likely to be raised, because, you see, any case of violence is a law and order issue. It's a breach of peace. For that, Delhi police has the power. They have the magisterial powers because it's under police commissioner system. So it is essentially a law and order problem. Okay. And the issue of inequality is a very important matter, you know. In fact, it is a sad commentary on Indian media that we totally ignored the report of the Oxfam presented at Davos, that 57%, super rich hold 17. But in the Indian context, the report is that India has 5,700 super rich people. 1% of these 5,700, namely 57, they hold the wealth of roughly 70% of the India's population. This was highlighted in Indian Express, in Times of India, all papers. But it did not register somehow in the country's psyche. It's interesting that it had escaped. Now, the issue of universal basic income that has come recently is in the background of this jobless growth and the huge inequality that is taking place in the wake of liberalization or etc. Now, this is a global issue. There are various views on this subject. In fact, I could give you the reference of an article in Foreign Affairs, which is the mouthpiece of the American conservative groups, expressed deep concern about inequality in US, which led to the movement, We the 99% movement. Occupy Wall Street. These two movements, We the 99%, and in fact the other day Bernie Sanders was on TV saying that we should go for an economy for 99%. Whatever we've been doing is really economy for 1%. You see? Now, these issues of, say, the tax havens all over the world, providing parking lots for huge wealth for people, creating jobless growth, unemployment, disaffection. So the question may be asked, what do you mean by universal basic income, UBI? And what are your views on it? In a way, Manrega is a kind of a UBI, coming to think of it. So what exactly is the implication of Manrega? What should be done? Should we expand the program to urban areas also? Because urban unemployment is high. And when you think of India's economy, few facts should be on your fingertip. What is the share of organized sector in the economy, in the GDP? No, organized. I'm not talking about unorganized, I'm talking about the organized. Okay, check these figures. What is the share of organized employment in the total employment of India? That's important. What is the share of agriculture? Suppose you are from an agriculture state. A question may be asked, what is the share of agriculture? You will give the reply 16% or 14, 15, 16%. So, do you think in that case agriculture is unimportant for Indian economy? Then you have to give an answer. What answer should you give? Tell me.
48% of the employment is in agriculture.
Excellent. These are absolutely correct replies, but you may add one thing. The way GDP is calculated, it does not show the contribution of agriculture to the industry indirectly. Like for instance, cotton textiles, jute, pharmaceuticals. A lot of industries are based on produce of the countryside. Therefore, it is wrong to say that agriculture, just because it is share in GDP, the way you calculate it, is low. Therefore, it is not important. That's not the thing. That's not proper. So, what we would expect that you have a broader picture in mind. You're not just going by what the economic survey has mentioned, but you think beyond that. That quality is going to make a difference. That is what we'll be looking for. Beyond the numbers. beyond the dry statistics, beyond the official reports. Take, for instance, another example, literacy in India. Fine. But we have no system of assessing the quality of education. Okay. Science and technology is an important area, especially when you are from engineering stream. Have you seen NSTI 2013, National Science, Technology, Innovation Policy? Any of you? Please see. You know why? Because this is a very well-written document. And again, unfortunately, as an Indian, I feel rather sad, though I've been trying my own humble way to talk about it. NSTI has not been given its importance in this country. Its buzzword is Srishti, S-R-I-S-H-T-I. What it stands for? A strong and viable science, research, and innovation-led high growth path for India. This is the buzzword, Srishti. Now, in this document, there are certain numbers. One is the concept of technological intensity. Suppose there is a product. How much technology had gone into manufacturing a product? That is called technological intensity of products or industry. Now, India's technology intensity of India's industrial products is 6 to 7%. And the policy seeks to achieve by 2020 14 to 15%. Now, if you look at the technological intensity of South Korean industries, it is over 70%. Then you relate it to another subject that engineers should be asked. What is the innovation index? There is a global innovation index. Where does India stand? Our position was it was 76, 3-4 years back. We have climbed up only a few positions. Global Innovation Index. Please check. Because 2 years back, 2-3 years back, it was just 76, but we have climbed up to 13, 14 positions. But where does China stand? So what I'm really trying to sort of create interest in you is to develop a mental faculty of comparing India with China in every sphere. Now, to give you a number, the high-tech exports as proportion of our total exports in India is 9%. The Chinese figure is 31%. Then, manufactured products as percentage of exports, our percentage is about 47%. The Chinese percentage is 94%. And because these technology inputs mean adding value to it, isn't it? So therefore, the size of the Chinese exports is $2 trillion because their manufactured exports are all high value added. So NSTI 2013 is designed to create that capability of India to leapfrog from a low base to a high base. So this broad picture would be complete only when you know the technology, development, economic numbers of China and neighboring countries also. Okay? Now, I'll just quickly run through some of the subjects which are likely to come up. One is environment versus development debate. The role of National Green Tribunal. I'd only suggest if you go through the last chapter of Jairam Ramesh का एक किताब है Green Signals. उसमें there's a small chapter, few pages are there, where he brilliantly sums up the debate. Eradication of poverty. This subject will come, is likely to come. Your response to rural poverty, urban poverty. You must get your right numbers. The concept of sustainable development and power generation capacity of India, the role of solar and wind energy, the role of the Panchayati Raj institutions in governance, role of the voluntary sector, NGOs, and the problems of 5th and 6th schedule areas of the country. What are the 5th schedule areas? You must be knowing. You must be knowing the 5th schedule areas and 6th schedule areas.
Scheduled tribal areas.
Mizoram, not Manipur. Manipur was never under 6th schedule. Okay. And 5th schedule areas?
Rest.
Central India. Now here, you may just go through what are the arrangements made for tribal development in 5th schedule areas. There is a tribal advisory committee which is chaired by the chief minister. And what are the reasons why Naxalite problem is taking place? And what should be done to deal with this problem? Suppose you are coming from Chhattisgarh or Madhya Pradesh, this question may be asked. And there are a few related basic issues. Why are these people called Naxalites? What is Naxalbari? Or how did it come about? Yes, but why is this village? Who are the leaders? Good. So, why is it that this movement is spreading when China has abandoned communism or Maoism? This question may be asked. If you are a candidate for the Foreign Service, they will ask, what is the difference between Maoism and Naxalism? What is the difference between communism and Maoism? So, this some basic understanding of the Marxist philosophy is required. Who was Marx? What is the difference between Marxism and Leninism? In Nepal, you have a Leninist government currently in power. Who are the Madhesis? Why is this problem becoming pretty complex? Why is Nepal opening up, Nepal has been able to open up an alternative route to the Chinese port? What are our relations with Nepal? The only Hindu country. So therefore, why is it that we have this kind of a problem? Who are the Madhesis? Now, one point. The media has been doing a great disservice to the country by describing the Madhesis as persons of Indian origin. That's absolute rubbish. Because they did not go from India. They were always a part of the Nepal kingdom. So why unnecessarily creating this problem? Madhesis are Nepalis. They may have names like Jha or Tewari or something like that, but they are Nepalis. They are born in Nepal, and their destiny is with Nepal. They are not like people of Indian origin who had gone to Mauritius or West Indies or some other place. So one would like to see you being able to take a balanced view on these subjects. Now, a few facts about Kashmir. What proportion of Kashmir's geographical area is under Indian control? Is 48? You're right, 48%. But but it will be useful to know what is the area under occupation of the Chinese. see, there's a man called Bruce Riedel, a strategic thinker who has written books on India, Pakistan and China, the triangle, where he's given some figures. 48% is under Indian occupation, 32% by Pakistan, and 20% is under Chinese occupation. This is the ground reality. So in this background, a question may be asked about CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Then TAPI, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan and India. So one would expect you to have an idea of the global scenario about energy, and especially the Asian scenario. Then the issue of Article 370 and Article 371. There is an Article 317 also that applies to Manipur and Nagaland. And finally, your demonetization. The last. What is your view? They might ask you. What do you think of it? A kind of balanced opinion is required, frank opinion, your own assessment. Okay. Right? Any question on this?
The issue of national anthem. Issue of national anthem, sir, should be.
Issue of?
National anthem is the same.
Yes, what is your view? You express.
Sir, if they ask about judicial overreach and all, should we, what should we?
You see, it's a good point. In fact, what is meant by overreach?
It was not, it's
Exceeding the limits. Exceeding the limits defined by Constitution.
Please read the provision in the Constitution about judicial review. And I mentioned to you about the judge-made laws. Now, judicial overreach or activism is the consequence of executive absenteeism. Take for instance, in today's paper, yesterday I saw Supreme Court has issued a direction to the center to see that farmers do not commit suicides. Have you seen any of you? Now my question will be, why should Supreme Court have to enter into this? Because the government has been completely keeping this issue below the carpet. I have figures to show that in Maharashtra, last year, every day, something like 40 to 50 people were committing suicide. Even now, in fact, some time back there was a foreign media carried a story, India's best kept secrets. One is the incidence of farmer suicides. So since the government is not doing anything about it, Supreme Court had intervened. Do you call it as overreach? I would not. As a citizen, to be frank, I would not. Similarly, in the field of environment, the National Green Tribunal had taken certain measures. Would you call it overreach? I give you an example. There's a place called Gar Mukteshwar nearby. You know about it? Gar Mukteshwar near Ganga? Gar Mukteshwar. You know about it? You know. You see, under the Namami Ganga plan, the government spent, the UP government spent a huge amount of money to install sewage treatment plants near the area. But the Ganga remains as clean as before. There was no impact. So a petition was filed that what has been the outcome of the Namami Ganga? So the Supreme Court, National Green Tribunal appointed a court commissioner. They visited the site. They came out to the report, which was in the public domain. The report says that yes, so many crores have been spent. The plant has been installed. But the connection to individual household has not been provided. Therefore, the old nalas are still functioning. So the report made a caustic comment. The sewage treatment plant is operational, but the system is not functional. Because every household has to be connected to the swell lines. If this is not done, then the swell lines are not really discharging any sewage. But to keep that plant working, you have to spend diesel, and they have to pour some water. So it is a case of sheer wastage. So NGT has issued a direction to the government to see that an action plan is drawn up on top priority basis to link every household latrine to the swell line. Now it is like putting the cart before the horse. Now this is not a case of overreaching or activism, but executive absenteeism leads to judicial activism. So one would expect you to take a balanced view on these issues. That is all I could say. Yes, so like this, the issues of climate change, it's a very important matter. What exactly did we commit at Paris? What exactly were the commitments that we made at Paris climate talks?
To create additional sink by forestation.
Quite right, quite.
Urban density.
To capture carbon, we have given a figure of some, I forget, 2 billion tons or something like that. Now, if you read that, this is what is called critical thinking. But we are losing 1 million hectares of forest annually, according to Forest Survey of India's report. If that is so, are you going to meet the commitments that we have made at Paris? So one has to apply its mind to these issues and critically come to a conclusion, right? These are the main points. Essentially, some of these issues will come up, like education. There's a talk of reforms in education. Some reports have been submitted by one of our colleagues. What is the state of education today in India? The issue of privatization of education. We have the private universities. The issue of foreign universities opening their campus. How is it going to improve the state of education in the country? Right? So these are essentially the issues which might come up. The list is endless. We can probably speak for a whole day, discuss whole day, still leaving almost 80% outside the scope. But basically, the people who will be in the board, they would like to see your analytical ability, your thinking capacity, your honesty of your approach. Honesty, I mean intellectual honesty. And then ability to present a point of view. If suppose you contradict, it need not lead to a quarrel. No. Sir, you have a point of view, but I think I hold my view. That's all. So, it has to be a polite conversation, not an acrimonious kind of a debate. No, not acrimony. There's no acrimony. It is a professional, purposeful discussion. That must be borne in mind. And I would suggest, again, take your DAF and just try to imagine what might be the questions that would emerge from your DAF, from your own statement. So I know of a case where the candidate's parents are all doctors, but she is also a doctor, but yet she wants to join IAS. So the question was asked, what was it that you still feel that you won't get in your medical profession for which you have been trained, that you are likely to get in the IAS, in that kind of manner. So if your DF shows scope for such questions, please prepare yourself mentally. Right? Okay? Any further thought, or you're bored already? 2.5 hours. Let me end with two things, two quotations. You see, Sri Aurobindo obtained 11th rank in the Indian Civil Service examination in the year of our Lord 1889. After he had obtained first class in Cambridge in philosophy, mathematics, Latin, and classics. So, what is said about luck? What is luck? In UPSC examinations, it is a matter of luck. But what is luck? So, Sri Aurobindo, in one of his poems, brilliantly defined luck in spiritual terms. Okay, I'm going to quote, which I heard years ago when I was young student. See, Aurobindo's main philosophy was that when a man or a woman takes a decision, say to appear in the UPSC examination, 10 lakhs, a million or 500,000 students will be appearing. This decision is the response to the command of God. That is his idea. That you have taken a decision to appear for the examination. You responded to the command. So from this it follows, let me quote, it is in Latinized English. When thou hast the command, care only to fulfill it, rest is God's will and blessings, which men call luck, fortune, or chance, unquote. So the message is that you have responded to the call of the God. Now, you do your duty. Success is in somebody else's hands. And God willing, you will succeed. And in this, I find a similar kind of an exhortation in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Have any of you read Shakespeare at any stage of your life? None of you?
Back in school.
You read?
Julius Caesar.
You read Julius Caesar? Caesar in difficulty. Caesar made a statement, which is relevant to all of you about life and the opportunities, the time and the space. This was something that preceded Bible, but it holds tremendous sway over human minds. Caesar said, and I quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men. There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, when taken at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted, all the voyage in their life is bound in shallows and miseries. In such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or lose our ventures," unquote. What Caesar said is that there is a tide in the affairs of men. In human life, there is a tide. High tide, low tide. You are in the midst of a tide, and you must take the current or else your ventures will fail. With these words, ladies and gentlemen, let me call it a day. I have great pleasure in talking to you. And if this helps you in some way to get through the examination, I will consider my efforts fully, amply rewarded. May God bless you. My mobile number is here. You are free to consult me whenever you like. I am on what is called WhatsApp. Therefore, anything, you are most welcome. I wish you a very great success in your endeavors and also in your life. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.